What is the Schomburg Center? To me, it is home. The place where we come to see who we really are, not just somebody else's reflection of who we are.
The Schomburg Center is a place of culture, it's a place of history, it's a place of knowledge.
The Schomburg Center, to me, is a repository of all of the things that has documented our sense of worth as a people.
For me, that means that it is a place of immense power.
The Schomburg Center is a public research library and a cultural institution
for the study of the Pan-African world.
It is perhaps the best in the world.
My Schomburg Center is Arturo Alfonso Schomburg.
Arturo Schomburg said, Black history and culture and intellect exists at a time when most people didn't believe that. He collected those evidences, and that became the beginning of the collection.
And it has expanded and has grown to where it is now a world-class institution.
It holds over 10 million items.
There's no parallel anywhere that brings to light what we as people of color have done, what we continue to do.
Black culture is all of culture. The universals that animate everyone's life happen here for all people.
The Schomburg for me is one of the center pillars of Harlem. When I started the journey of finding out about Red Rooster and Harlem, the very first place I went to was the Schomburg.
Researchers from around the world come and use what we have here.
I could not have written just about any of the books that I've written without the Schomburg Center's archives, resources.
The Schomburg Center is much more than a library. We encourage lifelong learning and exploration.
The Junior Scholars Program is a Saturday program with students from 5th grade to senior year in high school to help them learn about Black history and culture.
Learning about my history is important because it teaches me who I am.
The Schomburg Junior Scholars Program is going to do nothing but uplift them.
So many talented and brilliant people have walked the corridors of this amazing institution over the years. From Octavia Butler to Toni Morrison and James Baldwin, Ella Fitzgerald, Alvin Ailey, and Harry Belafonte, who graced the stage in this room of the American Negro Theater.
This place evokes great memories. It was a gift to us in our community to really try to find that space to reflect expressions of Black experience. I just knew that the environment, what I saw these young African Americans doing, was a place I needed to be.
What is my Schomburg Center? I'm standing here at the Cosmogram, which underneath holds the ashes of the poet Langston Hughes. On the evening when this Cosmogram was dedicated, people began to empty out of the auditorium. A jazz trio struck up, and to my amazement, Amira Baraka went over and asked Maya Angelou for a dance. And they started to dance on top of the Cosmogram, on top of the ashes of Langston Hughes, and I felt what a fitting way to kiss the memory of Langston.
The Schomburg Center is a research institute and a library, but it's so much more than that.
There's something going on every day.
So many amazing people come here to talk about their creative craft, to share what inspires them. The Schomburg Center's collections help to tell stories even beyond our walls.
The Schomburg Center is here in this exhibition at MoMA, One-Way Ticket, Jacob Lawrence's Migration Series. We depend on the resources of the Schomburg to enable us to tell this story. Thinking about the implications of the past on the present is absolutely crucial for understanding the next steps, understanding what we have to do to go forward.
We today have the responsibility of making sure that new artists and activists, new scholars and poets know that this place continues to be a resource and a source of inspiration for the work that we must continue to do.
The Schomburg Center is knowledge.
The Schomburg Center, to me, is education.
The Schomburg Center is home, it is family, it is foundational.
The Schomburg Center is inspiration.
The Schomburg is with me in everything that I do.
Community, inside and out.
The Schomburg Center is us.
The Schomburg Center is you, and we invite each and every one of you to find your Schomburg Center.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Yes. Welcome, Harlem. Come on. Hey, everyone. Welcome to our 11th annual Black Comic Book Festival at the Schomburg Center. This is our first, we can give it whoop. This is our first year back in person since 2020. And it's just a privilege and honor to see how many people are showing up for this event. Our exhibitors, our creatives, our panelists have been just phenomenal so far, and this is only day one. So let's see what a day two has in store. My name is Katie Atu-Tubman. I'm the manager of education programs here at the Schomburg Center and also the executive producer of the Black Comic Book Festival. And how many of you, is this your first time at the Schomburg? Raise your hand, first timers. Ooh, I like that. All right, I'm guessing everyone else is returning. Make some noise for yourselves. Well, whether you're returning to the Schomburg Center or this is your first time, I hope you know that this is a sacred space, and this is a space for not only just Black culture, but really a history and a phenomenal space for representation and storytelling. This is your space. We work tirelessly, and I mean tirelessly. I was here since 6 a.m., y'all. Woo, 6 a.m. We work tirelessly to make sure that you have access to history, to folks like these on stage, to programming that promotes that diversity, thought, and leadership in the Black and African diaspora. So we really thank you for coming to this event, and we hope that you'll stay in touch with the Schomburg Center moving forward. Some quick housekeeping before we jump into the program. We have our folks joining us online. We hope that you will engage in the comments and stay active in that community. For the folks in here, we thank you for being here. After the program, there'll be signings. Some of our exhibitors have booths in the exhibition marketplace. Some of them will be signing at outside our Latimer Gallery. You can get their books in the gift shop. But you will exit through that door when you're ready to go. Lastly, if you have any questions, there'll be a Q&A at the end towards the end of the conversation. There are microphones in the back of the auditorium. You can just get up, stand by a microphone, and ask your question. All right? Let's get on with it. So the panel you came to see right now is the Business of Comics and Sequential Narrative. Our moderator is TJ Sterling. Our panelists are Alitha Martinez, Shawn, Shawn Martinbrough, Gamal Hennesy, and Dedren Snead. Please give it up for our panel. Thank you, guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute pleasure to have you at this panel, and I want to say thank you because we assembled an amazing cast of people who are incredibly talented, knowledgeable, and have all kinds of experience in different areas, but specifically the business of sequential art, narrative, comics, and all that good stuff. So I'm going to go down the line. I'm going to introduce everybody. Well, actually, I'm going to actually ask all of you guys to introduce yourselves. Sorry. But I do got their bios, so I'm about to go deep into bios as well, so you don't got to do that much talking. But to my left is Gamal Hennesy. Please give it up for Gamal Hennesy. Attorney at law. He knows all law about comics. To his left is Dedren Snead, and leader, creator, subsume, comic creator, writer, absolutely amazing. And one of the GOATs, one of my favorite people, Alitha Martinez, is in the building. Shout out to Alitha. And last but not least, Shawn Martinbrough, one of my absolute favorite artists. If you guys haven't seen his work on Batman, please check it out. And again, I'm your moderator, TJ Sterling. I'm CEO of Ray Comics. I've got a booth over there, and everybody at this table pretty much has a booth. So if you haven't seen our booths yet, come afterwards. So I'm going to basically just have you guys go down. Please tell the audience a little bit about yourselves, what you do, and we'll go from there.
Is this on? Okay. I'm the person that you guys are gonna be the least interested in hearing about because I have no creative skill. I am not an artist. I am not a writer. I am actually an attorney. What I do in most of my work is I protect comic book writers, publishers, artists, because intellectual property has a very substantial value. Everybody in this room knows how many billions of dollars comic book ideas have generated over the past 80 years. And you also probably know that in the vast majority of cases, the people creating those comics are not the people making that money. What I attempt to do is actually change that narrative so that the people making those stories get to profit from those stories. So that's it. I think it's already on.
All right. So thank you, everybody. My name is Dedren Snead out of Atlanta, Georgia. I'm the founder of Subsume Media. I think I am here both as a panelist, but also a cautionary tale as I work in independent comics, but also look at the space of Subsume being a connection between sequential media and also digital media. So the space of how technology and comics and animation and really the future of media intersects. And so for us, we work in a space of Afrofuturism in action, looking at the African diaspora and how can we tell stories in a transmedia landscape. So as was said, not only from the legal standpoint, but how do we have technology understand and appreciate our blackness and our culture? And I think it starts in the traditional media space of comics.
I think I'm on the wrong side of this panel. You two are fascinating, and I already have a million questions for you. Well, my name is Alitha Martinez, and I'm a comic book artist. I'm currently on Wonder Woman and Lazarus Planet for DC Comics. My first book was Iron Man. That was 22 years ago, and just about every single character any of these companies have to throw out there, I've drawn them. Your turn.
Oh, no, I was listening. I thought you were going to keep going. Because you can keep going.
No, that's all right. No.
All right, hi, everybody. My name is Shawn Martinbrough. I'm a writer and an artist. I've worked for Marvel, DC, Image. I have an art instruction book, How to Draw Noir Comics. And yeah, I'm very happy to be here. And I'd like to say up front, guys, thanks for coming out. And there are no dumb questions, so please feel free to ask anything that you guys are curious about, because that's why we're here.
All right, so one of the things that we were really trying to do with this panel is kind of bridge the gap on lots of different levels, because the two at the end have lots and lots of experience about indie as well as professional comics working in DC, Marvel, and every big publisher there is. Folks like myself and Dedren are currently working in the indie comic space, and Gamal right here is kind of tying it all together with the legal part. So when we think about the business of comics, I think, let's say, rewind the tape maybe 20, 30 years ago, a lot of it was kind of a mystery. Like it was maybe more in, like it's something you'd either have to really be in those circles to understand some of the stuff that's going on. So any one of you guys who wants to jump in on this, what's something now that people can do to learn about the business of comics, just as, you know, generally speaking?
Well, the fact that something like YouTube exists allows people who, because before, when you talk about 20, 30 years ago, a lot of people had to learn by failure. You had to go out and say to yourself, I want to make a comic. And then there was no one to tell you, well, how do you go about making a comic? How do you go about printing a comic? How do you go about distributing a comic? So you just did it, and then you failed, inevitably. And then you did it again, and you got a little bit better, and the people who stuck with it are the people who, you know, wound up making it. You don't have to do that now. Now you can actually listen to and talk to people who on a consistent basis are either telling you the journey that they have or having, or you can just read the books that have already been created in that space. Like in 2020, I wrote a book called The Business of Independent Comic Book Publishing. Walks you through the entire process, whether you're talking about project management, advertising, marketing, printing, distribution, legal, the whole thing. So there's no reason that you have to walk through this process blindly anymore. There's no reason you have to have your intellectual property taken from you or not get paid for something. You don't have to do any of that anymore. These people who actually probably came up without all of that, they did it the hard way. It's not that way, it's not that hard anymore.
I think the spaces like this, absolutely being able to find stories, creators, cultures, and communities that represent you, that have that same similarity. I think we're in the absolute golden age of geek culture, right? How many shows do we have where back in the day we used to just have a Christopher Reeve Superman that became every few years, but now we have just streaming of every type of genre of a multitude. You can't even watch it all. But I think in that sense, though there's still an amazing opportunity for it, that a lot of us can find creators, particularly comic book creators, that are telling the stories, that are telling the narrative. Again, we have a fantastic building full of them right now. And so I think the intimacy of being able to have these spaces, particularly black spaces, and that have these curators that are willing to build and develop is really the same as looking at from the internet side of things, that we do have that voice and we do have those communities. So I think being able to just be able to have the independent market and marketplace that do fail and do fail again, but I think in that way of being able to build a larger culture that can sponsor 11 years and hopefully 11 more years and 11 more years for Black Comic Book Festival here in Harlem. I think those are the spaces where, again, the seeds of change are definitely being sown.
I think that if Shawn and I started talking about all our horror stories, we would either have you all in tears or we'd be in tears ourselves. It's the way we started in coming up through comics. Yeah, remember back in the day when the dinosaurs roamed the earth?
Yeah, pre-internet, yeah.
Yeah, we were drawing on the cave walls.
Oh, yeah.
I helped get the animals off the ark. This is what I did for comics. But I entered this space where I was not welcome. So I've been told I'm the first woman of color to draw the flagship titles for Marvel and DC. But, how did I get there and what does that mean? I'm still doing that. I have yet to reach the pinnacle of success that I think my friends here have and with their creator-owned projects. In fact, I'm reintroducing at this show my first creator-owned project, and boy, did that teach me. That was so painful, not in the sense because I was already successful in Marvel. I'd done Iron Man at that point. I understood comics. I understood how it went. What we lacked was the ability to print. We had to gang run at the time. We could not just, digital printing wasn't existing at that time in that space. The computers were not as powerful. We were still working in Quark. You had to get a lot of help. Yeah, Quark. If anyone's heard Quark, you're like, when you die and you go to hell, they're going to make you set comic books up in Quark. Just know it right now. That's what's going to happen to you. And we're doing this, but I thought, you have a team behind you. I thought that I had reached a point where I had arrived and that I understood. And I learned very, very quickly that I understood nothing and I did not get anywhere. I had to literally, at that point, stop this book. Not because there weren't issues drawn. To this day, there's 3 full issues drawn and only 1 has ever seen print. And this is only its 2nd time out. The team would not work with me anymore. I didn't understand the dynamic of success or what it took. You have to learn and you have to own not only your talent, but your knowledge. So I had to go back. I could not rely on other people to scan. I had to buy that $5,000 scanner. I had to sit down and learn Photoshop. I had to form my LLC, learn to file my taxes, so that way my studio is stronger and better today. But that failure and that thing, that rock I carry, I'm finally presenting it, and boy, do I feel naked, because that was that point. I wonder who would I have been if that book was successful? Would I be me now? Mm-hmm. I wonder, because I was in a gilded cage and very protected by an industry that needed me to do only what they wanted me to do. I had to break away from that. Just like I broke in, I had to keep breaking and going forward to teach myself and learn more and more. But now there's help. Tell them about it, Shawn. Tell them.
Okay. I think I'm always reminded that the most valuable commodity on this planet is information. It's not a car, it's not cash, it's not gold, it's information. And back when I got my first start in comics, it was 1992, and there was no internet. The only way you would get a job is if you photocopied your work and put it in a portfolio and carried that around and went to a convention and showed an editor your work, and they would critique it for you. So when I look at people today, there is no excuse to not know. There is just no excuse, unless you're lazy. Because I know people can Google something in 2 seconds to find out, wait, is so-and-so sleeping with so-and-so? Did so-and-so break up with so-and-so? What is so-and-so driving? But for their own career, they won't take the time to study. And to me, that's what it's all about. Because this is going to sound dramatic, because I really enjoy what I do and it's fun, but this is a war. You're literally going to war with a bunch of other people that want to do what it is that you do. So if you want to draw, and you want to draw comics, where there are thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people in this world that want to do that. So you need to study, you need to practice, and you need to make sure your work can compete with all those other people. If you want to be a writer, there's a billion people that think that hey, I want to write. And so for me, like, it's all about, if you want to do something, you have to take it seriously to study it. Study who the players are, and then go and talk to people and say, hey, listen, I'd like to know, how did you get into this? And get yourself a mentor. I've had multiple mentors in my life. One of them, Roderick Giles, right here. I took Roderick's class at the Children's Art Carnival, which was a nonprofit up on 40th Street and Hamilton Terrace. And that's where it was a free class, and I met Roderick. Roderick taught video, and so I learned how to shoot video, tell a story visually with video. At the same time, I learned how to draw, and I took a cartooning class, I took a drawing class, and I was just studying. And what I would do is I would get in the orbit of people that were professionals, that were doing this, so I can learn from them. I always tell students and aspiring artists and writers, when you want to do something, don't show it to your parents, and don't show it to your family and friends, because they love you and they don't know. And most of the time, people are not really looking for a fight. So they'll say, yeah, that's nice. Did you set the table for dinner? Did you do the laundry? That's nice, that's nice. If you really want to better your craft, you have to show it to people that do that professionally. And it's scary, because you might hear something you don't want to hear, but that's how you get better. And so tying this all into this, it's all about information. There are ways to see, how do I write a script? How do I get into comics? Who do I talk to? How do I show a portfolio? It's all there online that we didn't have growing up. We literally had to go and meet somebody and make that connection in person. These days, you can find out how Steven Spielberg got started by watching a YouTube video. So it's there. You just have to go out and find it.
That actually brings me to my next point. I want you guys to talk about how to break in. I think I get asked this question a lot, how to break into comics, right? Just so kind of people have an idea, there's so many different facets of the comic book industry, whether you want to be a writer or an editor or a penciler, or if you're an inker or a colorist. So many different functions and facets of the job that you kind of have to understand what you want to get into. So being that there's so many different things and the industry's evolving, how do you guys consider, or what advice could you give about breaking in now versus then, or just talk about breaking in as a whole?
Well, the first thing you have to realize when you decide you want to make comics and you want to be in the business of comics, there's actually 3 businesses that are separate and distinct. And like Althea was saying, if you're good at one, it does not necessarily mean that you can get into the other. The 3 types are independent comics, that this gentleman's doing and this gentleman's doing. There's freelance comics that the folks over there were doing. And then there's what's called a creator-owned comic. The difference in each one is the relationship that you have to the intellectual property you are creating. I'm not going to talk long. It's not going to be very lawyery. Don't worry. Don't get scared. The difference is if you're an independent creator, you own the intellectual property. Everything that happens to that, you decide because it's yours. If you're working freelance, it's exactly the opposite. You are creating intellectual property for someone else who is going to give you money. Now, if that book doesn't do well or doesn't sell or doesn't come out, you don't care because you already got paid and you can go do whatever you want to do. Independent is the exact opposite. If the book doesn't do well or if your business isn't set up well, it fails, even though you have the greatest comic in the world. Creator-owned sits in the middle, where you create intellectual property, and theoretically, the publisher who prints it or publishes it is going to share that revenue with you. I say theoretically because most of the time they don't. They just take your work and they take the money and you don't get anything. In any one of those cases, the way to break into comics is very simple and very straightforward. Go make a comic. Because once you actually make a comic, several things will happen at the same time. Number one, you will actually prove to yourself and to other people that you can finish a comic. No one wants to hear about your idea. No one wants to see your splash page. They want to see the comic because that ultimately is what the intellectual property is going to sell. The second thing is you will actually prove to yourself whether or not you really want to make comics in the first place, because it is not the easiest process in the world. It is not. Hard as hell. See? Preach. Anyway, the third thing is you will actually understand the entire process of comics, because it's not just having an idea. It's not just writing a script. It's not just drawing. You have to understand marketing. You have to understand distribution in relation to your marketing, because you can't just throw it out into the world and hope people will read it. You have to understand sales and pricing and taxes and project management and a lot of other different facets. And if you do a comic, if you create a comic, you will actually learn all of those things at the same time in a way that's very specific to you and your situation. And then you can go out, whether you want to do independent work or freelance work or creator-owned work, you will then be in a much better position, both creatively and from a business standpoint, to actually break into comics, because you will have broken into comics because you made a comic. So go make a comic.
No, all well said, and I think as I reflect to it, I have not broken into comics, right? So, as a independent creator, the idea, at least in the traditional sense, right? So the idea of working for a Marvel or a DC, I don't have that as part of my resume. But definitely, coming up in the comics game, that obviously was there was a goal, right? The idea was that I was going to make a comic and I was going to put it on the editor's desk, and they were going to say, absolutely, here's Spider-Man, just still go wild, right? And so
that's not how it works, but okay.
Having that pie in the sky idea, after a couple of years, the idea was that, I'm going to be waiting forever. There's so many amazing, talented people that are always in the line in front of you, in the line behind you. And so the idea was, I have good ideas, so why don't I just make my own thing? And so the idea of coming to comic book spaces and seeing people that look like me, I can intentionally remember meeting Sanford Green and Chuck Brown, two young brothers out of South Carolina, of course, and they had one of the most amazing comics ever created, Bitterroot. And so the idea, though, was being able to see them when that was just an idea, and me meeting them with this trapper keeper full of dreams, right? The idea, like, I want to be like you all. And they were like, you got to make something, right? You got to make something. And the idea of, well, I can just go home, try to put these things together, put some sketches and things, and make that book. And the idea was to try to pitch that to, say, an Image or a Dark Horse. And the idea then was, why don't I just make it myself? And so the idea of trying to build a company, build a story, and build a community, that's where Subsume started. And it was going to these spaces and places and saying, I won't be able to get in that front door of Marvel or DC, but why don't I just make my own door and make what I learn and learn at my expense a space and place that other people could also learn and build and collaborate together. And so now I get a chance to work with people that have that Marvel and DC experience, and they definitely got in. And I think, through some, I guess the idea of it being adjacently, I feel like I got in. So I never got a chance to really make that comic, and that's not written in stone that that'll never happen. But I think the idea of I'm going to show up and I'm going to do that book that was my dream book, I think the idea was I was going to make the book of my dreams. And so that, in that space of being an independent space, really I feel like fits mostly with where I want to go with my creative career.
Once again, it's like, that's what I want. I want that too, because when I entered comics, I did not understand anything about comics. They don't have them in Curacao. You don't see these kind of things growing up. You come to this country and they have this, oh my God, there's like Spider-Man on TV, and there's Voltron, and there's Robotech, and it's like, that's what I want. This is what I want. I entered comic with the idea that I would tell my story. I want to tell a story. It's like a Genies Wish. I said I want to tell a story, so I'm spending 22 years telling other people's stories. While I do have my own, and I form my own LLC, this is something like there's two separate Alithas. It's like Shawn said, it's like a war. When you're out there, you should have really frightened people and told them, why is New 52 called New 52? You know why?
No, you're getting in the weeds now. You're really getting in the weeds.
Yeah, well, if you're here, they're here for the good stuff. They're not here for us to talk nice and talk about self-care. Let's talk about this. Like, we're predators, you understand? And all you young people coming up, 52. There were 52 principal titles, 52 art teams working at once. I've got 2 of them. You want my job? Come for me. It is not easy. I'm raising a wolf to come and do the same thing. This is what we do, but That's not who we are. I want to do what you're doing. I'm so envious. I just feel so jealous and awful. Like I've wasted my life doing this. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm chasing other people's dreams and making new companies money. This is what I should have for me. But I'm a woman. I'm a woman of color. I'm a woman when they look at, they can't figure out what they're looking at. So it's not enough for me to have produced a comic book. That means nothing. Who's going to open that book and give me a chance after looking in this face? So it's everything I do. I cannot put my face out before my name. My name is everything. And I'm only as good as my next book, not the last one, not the adjacent book. I'm literally forgotten every book I do. So it's difficult to build a career. That's why there's a gap between you and I. So every book I do is a new book. I'm always new. I'm always being given that opportunity. After 22 years, there's nothing left to draw. I finally drew Superman and Wonder Woman. I'm Alexander the Great. I've conquered all the lands. I've laid my enemies dead at my feet, and I've now danced on them, and I still have nothing to show for it.
Well, I love you, Alitha. I love you.
I'm still coming for you, though.
I love you.
Get on my Batman.
I know you are. I know you are. I know you are. So the original question was, how do you get into comics? I got into comics working for Marvel was my first job, and then I started. Then once you work for Marvel, then DC wants to hire you, and back and forth. And what I found was it's about credibility, because you got to look at it like this. If you got to zoom out of it, there are editors working at Marvel and DC Comics, and they hire artists, writers, pencilers, colorists to do these books. And the editors just want the books done. They just want the book done on time, and they want them done decently. They'll settle for decent. They want them done well, but they'll settle for decent. And so a lot of people might say, well, how come this artist, he or she gets work all the time, but their work is okay? It's because they do their job on time. They get the book done. And they're not a problem for the editor. So if you can prove to an editor that you can do the job, they'll love you, and they'll give you work again and again and again. So you really need to show people that you can do the job, and that's what it's about. It's about credibility. Now with social media, I think I see a lot of people that kind of get confused, and they kind of put pics out, they kind of confuse it where they're not really sure if they want to sort of have a social life on social media or if they want to advertise themselves professionally to get work on social media. And for me, it's hard to do both. You need to make a decision because editors look on social media. So if you are trying to get work writing for like Marvel or DC Comics, you might not want to put something out there that's bashing Marvel or DC Comics. You might not want to put something crazy out there because they're going to say, okay, this person's not credible. If you want to do something, you have to show people that you can do it. And so as an artist, it's actually really great social media because you can put your work out there you can create your own website. I always tell people, create your own website. Don't put your art up on a site like DeviantArt or some place where you can find a gazillion artists because chances are there's going to be an artist better than you on there. So you don't want to lead people to some place where they can look at your competition. If you create your own website, you can curate that site to really show people who you are. And I find that people would rather work with someone who's decently talented, that seems like a cool person, than a genius who's a real pain in the ass. Because there are a lot of talented artists that are really great, but they're pains in the asses, and they can't meet a deadline. And editors will go, nope, I'd rather work with this person who is, they're decent, they're cool, but they meet their deadlines. So that's what it's really about. It's really about building credibility. And like I said, I started out working for Marvel and DC Comics, and along the way, as an artist, I worked with some of the best writers in the business, and I was just studying how they would write and craft a story. And so I've always wanted to tell my own stories, and so then I made the transition to writing as well as drawing. And so now what I'm doing is sort of splitting my time between drawing and writing, create our own projects that I own, and doing a project for Marvel and DC that I don't own, but working for them, it's money, and also it's prestige, and it gives me more credibility. So I can use that credibility to highlight my own stuff that I own. And that's the game that I'm kind of running now. So it is a battle, and it is war because there's so much content out there. And how do you separate your content from everyone else's? And it's a matter of credibility and making a good product. Because at the end of the day, we're freelancers. You know, we're not on staff. We're not, you know, we don't get a monthly paycheck from Marvel and DC Comics. We are freelance, so you're only as good as your next job, and you have to constantly have your job set up so that there's no gaps. And sometimes you hit a gap, you know, but it's constantly about sort of doing a really good job and then setting up the next project and going on to that and going on to that and going on to that. And it's a hustle, but once you get into the groove of it, you know, it becomes second nature.
And I have to quickly just mention that, Alitha, when you talk about your legacy, you're one of the first artists that I was very much inspired by, and that was your work on Iron Man. You know, I don't know how long ago it was, don't ask me the years, but I think the legacy, you know, we're talking about representing yourself as a brand, the legacy that we leave behind, and really, you know, what we bring to the table is so much more than just our talent. It's even ourselves as a brand, right? So each single person at this table is branding themselves in a specific way that, you know, creates that longevity within the industry. I think everyone breaks in a different way. I know my foray into breaking into comics as I started interning as at Marvel back in the late 2000s, right when they were bought by Disney. So the company went from a privately owned business to a publicly owned business, and everything was kind of changing in terms of how they were paying people, the structure of how the creatives work. And it was always interesting to me because Marvel was split between two groups, the freelancers and the staffed people who were on salary. Right? So freelancers typically would be the people who are the creatives. I mean, I'm sure you guys would guess that. Freelance is, you know, paid on a either a bi-weekly basis, but it's not, you don't have insurance. So if you want to be a freelancer, you have to think about that. Okay, do I want insurance? Do I want a 401k? Do I want stuff that a regular job would give me? And this is all of these things that you don't necessarily get as a freelancer unless you're paying for that separately. So also, understanding a little bit about that part of the business is just the research. And again, we are in a perfect time now where you can come to a panel like this or come to an event like this, the Schomburg, and learn so much. And I think you guys being in the room is already the first step to you being in the business of comics. You're already making that effort. And, you know, one of my favorite quotes is, time is the currency in which we live our lives, right? So time is whatever we spend our time on is so important. So if you're taking that time to sit here and listen to us, you really want to learn about comics, or maybe you're just tired from walking the show. Either way, I'm happy you're here. And, you know, we're going to start to go a little bit deeper now into the sequential narrative part. I dabble between writer and artist, so I kind of started as an artist, but now kind of learned more tactical traits about writing and pieces of writing, business of writing as well. And Dedren, also a writer, and everyone here at this table has created in some way. So I kind of want to go into, how do we start thinking about writing a story from a narrative perspective that could align well with comics, and whether it's hiring an artist or, you know, figuring the right artist for a story. Like, how do you guys go about doing something like that?
Well, before you guys go real deep into that, I'm just going to say my piece, and because I'm the lawyer, I'm going to just step back and I'm not going to say anything else. But when you're creating a narrative story, the first thing you have to decide from a distribution standpoint is, where should that story live? Because every story has a natural home. If you have something that is very deep and internalized kind of stream of consciousness, it is very difficult to do that on stage, because you just have a person standing there staring off into space. They make a crisis decision and then they leave. You don't know what happened. But it's easier to put that into prose, because then you can actually go into the head of the character. So that story has a much stronger life there. If you're talking about interpersonal things where things are decided through dialogue, that natural home for that story might be a play, because that's how conflicts get resolved in that medium. If you have like what's called an extrapersonal conflict, whether it's a war or a natural disaster or something, a grand spectacle, that makes more sense on film or television, because you can actually depict those scenes. The magic thing about comics is, and this is what people who don't read comics don't understand, is that all three of those things can actually exist in a comic on the same page, on the same panel. Because we have captions and we have thought bubbles, although we don't really have thought bubbles anymore, nobody does that anymore. But you can look internally to the conflict of the character, you do interpersonal things with dialogue, and you can do the most spectacular scenes that even with CGI is very difficult or very expensive to capture. So when you talk about narrative and how to build that in comics, I think one of the things you have to look at is where your conflicts are and how you're going to depict them on the page.
Thinking of how to work in a team environment, right? So the idea for me is that starting initially as an artist, the idea was that I felt like I was better at design. And so what I've been good at in life has really been designing things, whether that's code, whether that's teams, whether those are processes. That's the thing that I felt like I've been best at. And so the idea was for me to find people that really were good at one thing and trying to put together teams that really could help push the cart along a little bit faster. And so the idea of trying to tell stories, though I feel like I have some writing skills, the idea is to lean on the talents of others and be able to really just workshop these types of ideas and really have to separate myself, even when it's my own creator IP, realize there are people that can write this better than me, that people that can draw this better than me, people that can market it better than me. And so the idea of really just being about team effort and also making sure that people are compensated for said time and their talents is always going to be to your advantage. Even if it's to the point where I don't get paid, I've been able to invest in other people and really in where they want to go, and being able to have a system that really a tide that rises all boats. And so for me, my idea is that the job just gets done, right? The idea is that these ideas in my mind, they don't make any money, they don't make any movement if they don't make it to the page. And I had to figure that out a lot, again, at my expense. So as an independent creator, I think the thing with a sequential narrative, where it's that visual narrative, is that you have to learn that space of trust of others. And so that's been the best solution space for me so far.
I teach at the School of Visual Arts, Drawing 1 and Drawing 2, and I see a lot of young artists coming through. And I make sure the first thing I do is I interview them one at a time and ask them what they intend to get out of this whole comic book thing. And invariably I hear, I want to be a character designer, or I want to draw comics. And I'm going, that's very broad. That's a very broad stroke. It means a lot of things because this is super complex. And then they will work for 4 years and build this portfolio. And I will turn around and ask the seniors, what is this for? Because invariably, it's always something extremely creator-owned, very deep, at some point you almost wonder, what were they smoking when they drew this? I don't understand. I have no idea what this is, and they're going to present this to companies. And I know that they're going to take one look at this mess with cursing, nudity, sometimes suicide, heavy topics, and wonder why they don't get work. And then they become frustrated or scared. The worst is the fear. So it's just like Gamal says, you have to understand what you're creating and what you want out of it. You just don't go in with, I want to do this, because I said, I learned a hard way. It's not about me wanting to tell a story. What do I have to say? Where am I going to say it? Am I really going to make money doing this? You have to ask yourself the hard questions. It's not just about your talent. You have to own your talent or you're a fluke. And you don't want that, you won't last. But what are you presenting? Am I going to take this suicidal, crazy piece to Marvel and get mad at them for not hiring me? No. So I can't present that in that space. It's not the right space for it. So again, what am I creating? Why am I doing this? And this comes down to the other thing I tell my students. I say, after I ask you what you want to be when you grow up, I tell them we're both consumers and we're creatives. As a consumer, we know exactly what we want. You browse the show, you look down 5 seconds, you could tell if you want that book or not, you move on very quickly. If you want to talk and engage with the artist, fine. But you're very rarely really looking at the work, within moments. But as a creative, your mind races in all these various directions. You want to show this, and I want to draw that. Or I like spaceships. I love spaceships. Anything that's in space, and if Godzilla could be in space attacking it, it would be perfect. But will that sell? Is that really what's going, and do I get to do that? So it's really a weird space that we live in, that we rarely consume or create what we consume. And it's this funny, you're living with this weird balance. Okay, do I get to draw Godzilla in space? No, never. I'm drawing Wonder Woman on an endless island. And it's wonderful. But is it truly what I would buy? Is it Halo? Is it something that I will run out tomorrow and buy? No, not really. So it's really weird. So understanding what you're creating for, why you're doing it. And Shawn will tell you the other part. Tell us. I need to know.
You know, I have to follow you, Alitha. I'm just listening to what you're saying, so I'm like sucked in. What was the question? What was, TJ, help me out.
So the question was, when you're thinking about creating a story from a writer, artist perspective, like how do you go about like building your team, visualizing the sequential narrative and informing that and pushing that message across?
Gotcha. Well, I think when I had the opportunity to write, I was like, okay, well, what do I want to write about? And I have a gazillion stories, and it's about editing. I think editing is the key to actually everything. It's a key to storytelling, and storytelling applies to everything. And I really had to edit my ideas down in terms of what is the one idea that I want to focus on for this particular story. And so I kind of nailed down a theme. I'm like, okay, let me kind of work that theme. How does that theme work in a 3-act structure, beginning, middle, and end? What's the journey of the character? Is that interesting? Have I seen that before? Can I avoid certain stereotypes or certain things that I've seen done before? That's the process. And then I try to write all my ideas out and then cut to what I think is necessary and also leaves room for interpretation. And I really love the editing process in terms of writing. Like that's, to me, I really love it. Like I'll write something and then just chop it, and it's like the hatchet master. You'll just chop it, and I really love that. But I also love working with other people. So there are projects that I'm writing that I'm not drawing, and so I kind of have to give up that freedom to work with another another artist. And I actually like seeing what another artist will bring to my writing, and it's interesting. And there's certain aspects of making a comic book that you just can't do it all. There are very few people in this industry that can write, draw, color, letter, design, do covers. It's a whole process. So you don't have to do it all yourself, and you really shouldn't if that's not where all your talents lie. So I have no problem working with a letterer because I respect the craft of lettering, and so I will work with a professional letterer because that's a whole skill set. I will work with the colorist. Even though I can paint and I got my degree at the School of Visual Arts and I understand color theory, I see my work in black and white. So I work with a colorist all the time. And I actually love going back and forth with this colorist and saying, okay, well, let's try this, let's try that. I think you have to understand that sometimes it's better to work with other people because you learn how to, that's the whole process in this industry, is working with other people. Every comic book has a team and everyone has to work together. And the better you work with other people, I think the more you open yourself up to getting better, because that way you can kind of see what other people are doing. So I really enjoy the creative process, and I love working with other people, and so I think that's really paramount. Now listen, like Alitha said, if you want to put a book out that's just, I just want to express my creativity, that's one thing. However, if you are putting a book out that you want to make money from, then you really have to do your homework and say, will this be commercial? Who is going to buy this? And you can't get upset if you put something out, if you've done no homework, and you just throw something out there and people don't buy it, because maybe they're just not interested in what you're selling. Like, it is amazing how people turn a blind eye to, like, these are people that if you walk down this, let's say you walk down 125th, you see people selling, well, they used to sell CDs. Yo, man, buy my music, buy my music, buy my music. Well, how often do you stop and buy their music? No, because you're like, well, what does it sound like? Yep, thanks, boom, I'm done. But then people that put out comics will be like, no, buy my stuff because it's me. I put it out there, and I'm like, well, but it's got to grab me. Like, the art's got to grab me. The story's got to grab me. All this has to grab me. So you have to think about, is this commercial? Is this selling? Are the same people that, am I going for the same audience that buys the X-Men book every month? And if so, then my book has to compete with the X-Men book and how that looks every month. And if you get, and sometimes you're going to face rejection, and in this industry, you're going to get rejection all the time. You got to shake it off, give yourself a minute to process it, work through it, because it can really suck, it can really hurt. But then you got to get up, try harder, look to see where can I improve myself, and you keep it moving. That, to me, is, I think, that's the basis of putting together any project, especially comics.
Right on. We are going to get to a Q&A session now, so if you guys have questions for anyone here on the stage, this is a perfect time to ask. So I think there's a mic back there, and there's one over there. So does anybody have any questions in the audience for our panelists? This gentleman right here. Can we bring him a mic? Okay.
Yeah, we want it on the video.
You have.
We want you on the video, man. Please, take a moment.
And for the picture, it would have been. But that's fine. For the next one, if you can go to the mic, that would be great.
What are your thoughts on?
I got a lot of thoughts.
That's why he didn't need a mic, see?
You speak up, please. Please speak up.
I felt that in my chest. I was like, what?
What are your thoughts on AI as far as allowing creators to use the prompts to create stories and Mid-Journey to create art?
I was going to ask Gamal just that when you were talking earlier. I was like, ooh.
Well, I did. We actually just did an hour and a half long symposium on AI and art that's actually currently on YouTube. We had Heidi McDonald, Mark Wade, machine learning specialist actually talk about this because this is one of the biggest topics in 2023 in the creation of comics. There's several different aspects from a business, legal, financial standpoint of how AI can impact comics. From a legal standpoint, the law is not settled yet because the way systems are being developed may be being done in a way that is actually violating copyright across the board. The way that people are actually compiling books and selling them, there may not be a way to sell these books because to sell a book, you have to own the intellectual property. If you don't own the intellectual property, then you can't sell it. Or if you can sell it, like public domain, then everyone else can sell it and the value of your book decreases greatly. However, having said that, because comic book development is a multi-stage process, there are parts of that process that AI could be very helpful. For instance, as an example, let's say you have to do a scene with trees and a background. You just draw one tree, you then tell Mid-Journey, draw all the other trees in the background like this tree. You could do it day, night, shadows, light, whatever, in a way that actually speeds up the process. Now, if that is how you're using it, or if you're using it for Mark Brooks, when we were talking to him at MegaCon down in Orlando, he said if he took all of his work and then put it into an AI system that he controlled, then when he wanted to get ideas, he could actually basically sift through 3 decades worth of work to get an idea that then he would create an original piece from. And as long as you're using it as a developmental step and you're not trying to sell a finished product based on AI, you'll be fine. If you're trying to actually develop and sell a comic that is purely based on AI, there's quite a few publishers who come out and say they're not going to sell it. If that's the work you submit, they won't hire you. Now, of course, a lot of them won't be able to tell at this point whether because if you used something like ChatGPT to make a comic book script, I've done it, came out in like 15 minutes, it wasn't Watchmen, but it was okay. And in those instances, you might be able to do it, but it's going to be more and more difficult. And like I said, it may be completely illegal until the Supreme Court comes down on the fair use case. There's no way to know. Sorry, I took all the time to answer that question.
Yeah, I've seen creators. Creators spend one day and create 88 pages of a comic, and then they sell it. And That's the, I'm asking, because that's the future of
When you say they sell it, do you mean it was in Diamond and went into a comic book shop, or it went to Barnes & Noble, or do you say they sold it online?
Yeah, they use Amazon, KDP, they sell it, that's what they go to other website and they upload it and they publish it. And using all AI from the chat GPT and, and everything like that.
Yeah, I was just gonna quickly just add, don't make comics with AI. Please don't do that. It's a terrible idea. Like, the worst way to kill your reputation is to do something like that, because again, the AI is taking from art that already exists, so it is plagiarizing to a certain extent. We're going to move on to the next question so we keep the time going. Or does anybody else want to talk about that real quick?
It is plagiarism. You are taking a piece of me, a piece of Shawn, squishing it together, and there's no continuity to it, meaning it doesn't understand that it all has to look like the same artist drew it. It's like a million artists drew this. I think this is the wrong place, right, this setting to be talking about this whole thing, because it's like you're doing something where we're already paid a slave's wage to work, and we will work until we burn out, and then you come along and you take 20 years of my life from me, and you turn around and make money. When I have to sign a contract that swears I drew everything myself, upon pain of them, I think, hanging me by the heels, I don't know what they're gonna do. When you come on, it's like, hey, look what I made.
Thanks.
I would just say compliment, but not let it create, right? Because just the real sense is that it is absolutely not going anywhere. It's going to be exponentially more in all of our lives. So to your point, don't use it to just make a comic and go cook eggs afterwards or whatever. But definitely know and understand that that's going to be a part of the component of doing any type of business in the future. So I would just say work on your own craft. It's going to speak for itself.
I mean, I'm kind of late to the whole AI thing because I've just been busy, but I've just been hearing people complain about it. To me, it seems from a really quick sense, just as another form of automation, which is just happening, and so now it's come for the creative sector. And for me, I think that it's easy. It's easy. And whatever's easy doesn't really last. It doesn't last, it's not compelling. And I think that, and I see a lot of the stuff that I see looks cool. Like there's some really cool images, but to me, a lot of that stuff looks the same. It looks like the same person did it. And I think that's a problem. That's problematic. And if you understand how the art industry works and how editors work and how people select artists to work on a project, they're hiring you for your distinctive style. And if everything looks the same, you're not going to stand out. I think that that's the way you can combat automation, because it's that human element that makes something original or different. You know what I mean? And computers can't simulate that. So I think the more distinct you can make whatever you create, I think you'll probably be okay.
Absolutely. And we have about 5 minutes left, so we do have to power through these questions. If the next person can go, and we'll quickly answer it and keep moving.
Hi, my name is Ifani Oanaka, creator of Big Bang. I'm releasing in the fall. I had a question and a clarification. I wanted to know what the difference between a creator and an independent was again, because I didn't really understand what creator run versus independent was. Is there like an engine, or is that why? Because there's an engine?
I apologize if I talk too fast. Basically, the difference between an independent creator who has an independent company owns all of the intellectual property related to that comic. So if you put out a comic and as an independent, you own everything that happens to it. You own the copyright, you own the trademark, and no one can go out and make a movie out of your comic unless they pay you or unless they get the rights. They may not pay you, but that's a different story altogether. If you're a creator-owned situation, you go to another company that has distribution and printing, and you take your original story and you make a deal with them. The deal, in theory, is you give them a part of the revenue for that book, and they put the book out. That way, you don't have to worry about printing, distribution, sales, taxes, and all the stuff you don't really want to do. The only thing you have to watch out for is there's a big difference between giving them the right to take some of the revenue and giving them ownership of the intellectual property, which is very easy to do because all you have to do is sign a piece of paper that you didn't read. That's the difference between independent and creator-owned.
Thank you.
And my question, sorry, go ahead.
Actually, I just want to jump on something
Yeah,
real quick.
sorry,
And just
sorry.
something real quick, though. Something that, honestly, like I think Gamal can really speak to this is that all artists need to familiarize yourself with the law and working with lawyers, because we are not trained to read contracts typically. So we're like, it's okay, whatever, and that's how we get took. And so do not get over your fear of working with lawyers. You know, and yes, people think that all lawyers are expensive. They're not. You can do your shopping. And there are a lot of places that will offer free legal services to artists. You know what I mean? So I would definitely familiarize yourself with the law, reading contracts, and having people help you understand a contract and work with lawyers.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And the last question to the young lady over there.
I didn't ask my question at all. Just
Okay.
clarification.
Sorry, we have to move on. We have to give someone else one more thing. All right. Thank you. Go right ahead. Thank you.
As a lawyer to another lawyer, when do you want to be engaged, and when do you want somebody to speak to you? What time should they come to visit you?
Long before you decide that you are going to publish your comic. When you have the idea that you are going to make a comic, there's two things that you should decide. One, how is this getting paid for? And then two, once you decide that, what it is that you want to do, like I said, creator-owned, independent, freelance, at that point, you should then talk to an attorney. Because depending on what you want to do, you may have to set up a company, you may have to file copyrights, you may have to get contracts to hire artists or writers, because this gentleman was a client of mine, and that's what he did. If you're working freelance, you have to understand the contracts you're signing. Alitha came to me several years ago with contracts that she did that she needed analyzed. So as early in the process as you can, you need to find a lawyer and engage with a lawyer. The thing that you should not do is you should not hire people, make a comic, print a comic, ship a comic, and then call me. Because like, what am I supposed to do now? I mean, it already happened.
Very true. Our last question goes to the young lady right over there. Please come on right in and ask.
So, I wanted to ask that how much money will other comic creators make with different creations and levels on their creation?
Is the question how much money is potentially a creator could make? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Limitless.
Out of the mouth of babes, right?
There's no amount on the bag that you can make. I guess what I'll quickly just say to your question, if you're thinking about creating comics, save your money. If anybody is here thinking about getting into the business of art and you want to hire people or work with people, save your money. Instead of going on that trip and using your tax money to go on a cruise or whatever, put that money away in a savings account. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was to put at least $8,000 to $10,000 away in a bank account so I could have enough money to print my comic, to obviously pay a lawyer or pay a letterer or a colorist, whatever it may be, because those expenses add up, and when you do have your finished product, you're going to want to basically recoup those costs. So there is no ceiling to how much money you can make, but you do want to save as much as you can up front so you can have that investment for the future. Do we have any more time? Okay, so we can do one more quick question. Does anybody have one more quick question? Oh yeah, come on back, bro. Yeah, it's all good.
Hi, hello. My name is Ifani Owanaka, creator of Big Bang Studios, releasing in the fall. If you write a story and let's say you are the only sole creative mind for the story, how is it bad or good to write too far ahead into the story? Like let's say 4 years into the storyline. Is it bad or good?
Again, it depends a lot on what kind of comics you're going to be making. If you're making independent comics, you can go as far into the future as you want because it's your comic. You're going to be doing whatever it is you're going to be doing. If you're doing a creator-owned book, depending on the publisher you work with, they may want to have some kind of hand or input on the narrative. So if you go too far ahead, they're going to say, slow down, because we're going to actually change issues 2, 8, and 16, so don't even worry about it. And if it's freelance, you don't get to make that decision at all, so don't even worry about it.
So then just a quick follow-up for the two brilliant art freelancers on the right. would you, or actually for everybody, would you then at that point say no to a production deal if you were going to lose your creative integrity at some point? Or is there a tipping scale?
It's really up to you on what kind of deal do you want? What do you want to sell out for? That's the number. Like, it's like, what's your number? Is your number $500? Is it $500,000? You know what I mean? It's really up to you. And honestly, this also comes down to you doing your research. So you should know that if someone comes to you and they want to make a television deal for your project or a movie deal, well, what's the going rate? What's the going rate, and ask for more. You know, just get in the habit of asking for more. You know what I mean? But you have to know, you have to do your homework and say, but what is the ballpark? What is the ballpark that I'm in? So it really comes down to you and what kind of deal you're willing to sell it for. Now, if you got to make the rent next month, I mean, you might be like, all right, can we do $800? I'm just joking, but I'm saying. But yeah, just do your research, and it's up to you in terms of what kind of deal you're willing to sell.
He also said a weird word. He said integrity. And to me, are you talking about artistic integrity? Like, you know, this is the hill I'm going to die on? Or you're talking about copyright stuff? Because copyright and integrity, those are two different animals. It's like you're talking about how far, where's my stop to draw something? Like what I will not draw? Or my intellectual property being given away for free, or, you know, for in perpetuity. I love that when I read that in a contract. I'm like, what? Forever and all time? Really?
Yes,
which
throughout
one are you
the
talking
entire
about?
universe. Yeah, that's how it's written.
Yeah, which one are you talking? Because artistic integrity, that's a whole other ball game.
Yeah,
that is something that, you know, that's personal unto yourself, and you give nothing away in that sense. But what you own, your copyright, your IP. You mean selling my idea to a company and watch them do a Superman with it and leave me run off and have the Man of Steel and leave me with Superman? And now everyone can draw Superman? I can draw Superman tomorrow and call it Superman, and they can't do anything to stop me, but I can't call it the Man of Steel? That thing? What are we talking about?
Answer.
Yes.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about? Well, we all have I've got a funny story I have to tell about that really quick.
Yeah.
I have to, because it was for the contract that I had Gamal read for me. This was the weirdest book. I don't really work it for independence. I hate doing that. I like working in understanding and working under the protection of a covenant, meaning this company will not ask me to draw something that would make me not be able to sleep at night. And then I got a script that was so horrific that I could not sleep at night. And I couldn't draw it. And I told them on the day that Stan Lee died, as they're yelling and screaming and she's threatening my child to try to get me to draw this, I said, you know what? You have a responsibility to the audience. You cannot draw something that destroys black male bodies to make $1. You can't do it. And luckily, the contract that I had him read, she did not take my advice and take my creative rights away, so that way I have 50% ownership in the book. And from that day to this, I've blocked that book from ever being published or seen again every time it comes up, because she didn't listen. I own part of it, so she can't do anything with it.
And that is the magic of a creator-owned book. If you own the intellectual property, you can say what does and does not happen with the book. When she came to me and said, the writer wants to do this, I don't want to do this, and they're pushing, I said, well, let me see the contract. Contract says you own half. Well, if you own half, you don't have to do anything. Now, flip the script. If she was doing a freelance book, the only thing that they could do is basically cut her off the book, give her a kill fee, and then they'd bring in somebody else, because there would be somebody else to draw that book. But if you own the rights, you get to say what happens. If you don't own the rights, you don't get to say what happens. That's just, it's not even comics, that's life.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for the questions. And there's so much more to the business of comics. We didn't even get a chance to talk about conventions or Kickstarters or all these other things that are part of the business that we are in. So if you like this panel and you want to see it again, and you want it to come back next year where we go into deeper and more stuff, please drop a little suggestion box or a little message in the suggestion box, or just tell whoever is walking around how much you like the panel. Thank you guys so much for coming. Appreciate it. And lastly, I'm just going to have everybody go down the line and just say their social media. Please follow everyone here on their socials. Go right ahead, Gamal.
Gamal Hennesy is a very easy name to find on the internet. You just type in Gamal Hennesy. You will find the website that I have my practice. You will find Comics Connection, which is the online school that we have to teach people the business of comics on a weekly basis. You will find the Facebook, the YouTube, you will find all those things. Just type in Gamal Hennesy. It's real easy.
Likewise, Dedren, not too many Dedrens walking around the world. So Dedren Snead, you can find our information at subsumestudios.com. And for the most part, yeah, I think that'll about do it for us. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, between Dedren Snead and Subsume. Thank you.
I'm Alitha Martinez online at Ariat Storm on Instagram and Twitter, and www.ariatstorm.com is my own site.
S. Martinbrough at Instagram, Twitter. I really retweet stuff. And I'm on Facebook, and you can always look me up on my website, ShawnMartinbrough.com.
Thank you. And lastly, you can follow me at TJ Sterling Art or at RAE Comics. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Have a great night.
Amazing. One more round of applause for this panel, because this was incredible.